it does seem it's steady as she goes when it comes to policy, but this year's going to grow faster than they thought, but last year won't be, and the following year won't either. So how can they ultimately say that they're elevating their view of the Japanese economy fundamentally?
Well, it is a mixed outlook, Rish, as you mentioned there. I think one takeaway was they've tweaked the language on the inflation outlook for the first time now, actually, since 2014. They're saying the risk to prices is balanced. Of course, they had been saying that pressure on inflation had been skewed to the downside. That probably reflects what's going on with input prices for businesses, for example. It probably reflects the weaker yen. It's been the worst performing major currency, so Japan is importing some inflation. But that said, though, there's no hint of a hawkish message in these inflation forecasts. It's a nudge higher rather than a dramatic adjustment. And on the growth side of things, like you say, I mean, they're warning there about still downward risks to the economy. And given the news coming out of Tokyo this morning about the risk of more restrictions to contain the spread of the virus, you'd have to say that the overall takeaway from the BOJ this morning is a pretty mixed one.
And you've got to wonder about the policy trajectory, because Kuroda has said time and time again he will not be swayed by the policies of other central banks. Can he maintain that position?
Well, exactly, as in I suspect there will be some managing of expectations in his press conference later, because, the headline today is that they have tweaked their inflation forecast, nudged them a little bit higher. They have tweaked their language around inflation for the first time in a few years, now saying those risks are balanced. But at the same time, though, I can't imagine Governor Kuroda would really want to send a hawkish signal to the world. He won't want to see the yen start to rally, for example. That's been one of the defining characteristics of the BOJ in recent years, trying to keep a lid on the yen. So one would imagine he'll come along and point to core inflation, which is around 0.5% in November. He'll point to temporary factors such as the phone charges that have been skewing things there. And of course, he'll probably talk about the ongoing threat from Omicron and the threat to growth. So as I say, the headline might be coming into the press conference that the BOJ has tweaked its inflation outlook, but I can't imagine Governor Kuroda will want to be even remotely seen to be sending a hawkish signal, or that they're on a road to policy normalization like other central banks around the world are.
So, and that begs the question, at least they're talking about normalization, and that's got to be encouraging, but it's a risky path for the country to get there.
It's a very risky path. I mean, the idea of normalization for the BOJ, Rish, would certainly be a long, long road ahead. And in fact, you have to note, in fact, that the BOJ did also make clear this morning that they are willing to take further steps to support the economy if needed. So I don't think they're in any way hinting either at a dramatic change towards, say, the negative rate or their asset purchases, or even towards, moving towards kind of policy normalization that we have seen in other economies. We're certainly not getting anything like the story that we see with the Fed, or anything like some of the more middle ground seen with other banks, such as the Bank of England, for example. I think the overall message from the BOJ today is one that the global inflation pressures are washing up on their shores. There are some channels where it's popping up. They're taking note of that. They're adjusting their inflation outlook. But at the same time, I don't think there's any hint that they're moving towards policy normalization or anything like that. The BOJ remains on standby to support the economy.